Okay, so hello guys, welcome again to the live week session, problem solving session for the course Introduction to Semiconductor Devices, which is being conducted by Professor Naresh Imani from IIT Hyderabad. Just to introduce myself again, I am Soham Lakote, currently a third year PhD student at ISC Bangalore, and my broad research area is in the field of analog and RF circuit design, especially the radars, the circuits which are designed for the radars which are used for vital signs monitoring, that is heart rate and breathing rate. Now the organization of the session will be like this. So first we will just solve few conceptual questions. I don't have a lot of numericals today because the topic is such that unfortunately there are not lot of numericals that are available in the standard reference books. So we have few conceptual questions, then we have a few numerical questions as well, and then we will since this will be a last problem solving session from my side for this course. So the hello, is my screen visible or it stopped being visible? Hello, my slides are visible or not? Hello, my screen is visible. Is it visible now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I was telling about the organization of this session. So we have few conceptual questions, then we have few numerical questions, and then we will try to connect everything. Since this will be a last problem solving session from my side, we will try to start from few application, the real life electronic applications, and from there we will try to connect with whatever we have learned till now. Okay, so let's start with the conceptual question, and since we don't have a lot of questions today, so I really want you guys to be interactive, so please help me in solving these questions now. So now this is the first conceptual question for today. So they have given this a diagram for band gap energy versus the lattice constant for different wavelengths, right? Now the first question that they are asking, a graduate students want to fabricate a red LED emitting at a wavelength of lambda is equal to 650 nanometers, right? Now referring to the data given in the figure 2, so on the right hand side what you are seeing is the figure 2. Which compound will you suggest him or her to choose, right? So now how should I solve the question? I will just give a small hint to you. Since we have to we have to select a compound for fabricating the red LED, right? So we first have to find the the band gap energy corresponding to this lambda, right? So I'm just drawing a horizontal line over here which corresponds to lambda is equal to 650 nanometers. Okay, so now we have got 2 points now, right? So first, this is the first point that we have got, and now this is the second point that we have got, right? So let me name, this is the point number A and this is the point number B, right? So now I am sure you must have referred to the sir's lecture. So now can you guys please help me, which among the point number A or which among the point number B should I choose to fabricate, to basically to select the compound for fabricating my red LED? Which point is the suitable?
Sir, near gallium phosphide to AFP.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Near the band gap of close to 2.3. That's 2.25 to 2.36 something.
I'm not getting what you are saying. I'm just asking you which point will you select between A and B. I've already line a horizontal line over here which corresponds to 650 nanometers. So which of these points will you choose? Okay, I will just help you. See, for point number B, see, we are dancing between indium phosphide and aluminum phosphide, right? So we are going something like this. So we are moving along this trajectory. And how are we moving along this trajectory? So you can see we have a mole fraction over here, right? We have a mole fraction. So by changing the value of this mole fraction, we can dance from starting of this INP, and we can go like this. The material is still direct band gap, and the moment you reach over here, then your material becomes indirect band gap, because it is written over here, direct band gap and indirect band gap, right? And then we move towards the aluminum phosphide over here, right? Now similarly, if you want to dance between the indium phosphide and gallium phosphide over here, then again you are gonna move like this, right? You are gonna move, still the material is direct band gap, and now you want to go over here. Now this is the indirect band gap, right? Since we are fabricating LED, right, we want direct band gap material because we want it to be very efficient. We don't want the non-radiative recombination process to which will basically dissipate the heat, right? If we don't want it to convert as a heat, we want photons out of the LED, right? So now these are the two parts that I have showed you, right? And now just to revise your concept, what we do. So for example, we take a gallium arsenide substrate, right? We take the substrate, then we have a buffer layer, and then on top of that we grow the epitaxial layer, right? You must be knowing this, right? We grow this epitaxial layer, and this epitaxial layer corresponds to these 5 options that they have given us, right? So now whatever material, base material we are choosing, right, it must be present in that epitaxial layer, right? Because let's say you want to grow, let's say for example, GaX, IN1 minus X and P over here, right? So if none of the gallium, indium or phosphide is present over here, none of, sorry, not one, either of two of them is should be present. So for example, gallium phosphide or indium phosphide, either of them should be present over here. I cannot grow this layer on top of what you can say some aluminium or something, just aluminium phosphide or something, right? So now this is the basic to solve the question. Now can you guys please help me in solving the question? Just answer me which of the points you will choose, point number A or point number B, and why. I will lead you towards the answer. Okay, just tell me what is the basic most condition of growing some kind of compound on top of this substrate. What is the basic condition? What is the basic most condition of growing this type of a, yeah, somebody was saying something. Hello. Guys, what we generally see in this diagram, like you must have seen from the lectures, right? Sir must have taken the example of 1.55 micrometer wavelength light which we use for fiber optic communication, right? The problem is exactly similar to this. Guys, nobody want to try? Any hints, any guess? Is it that difficult? Guys, say something. I won't be moving. Like I have few problems with me, and I have a very interesting discussion at the end. But I won't be moving it unless until you speak something. Hello, am I even audible? Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible? Okay, why nobody's saying anything? I mean, I'm very confused. Why you guys don't want to answer anything?
So just I can't understand the question.
You are not able to understand the question.
Yes, just now I was joining.
Okay, okay, sure. So a student wants to fabricate a red LED actually, and that so it should be emitting the light of wavelength around 650 nanometer. So now this 650 nanometer is present over here. So now what they are asking us is to refer this diagram, right, of the lattice constant and the band gap energy, right, and they are asking us to choose the compound which will help us in getting in emitting this the light which will be having the wavelength of 650 nanometers, right. So now what I had done, I had just marked a horizontal line corresponding to this 650 nanometer wavelength, and now based on this diagram we got two intersection points over here, right. So now I was asking which of these following points will you choose, and for a hint I had given ki we generally choose a substrate, and on top of that we grow an epitaxial layer, and these epitaxial layers are the only five options. These are the only five options that have been given to us, right. So now the question is like which of these epitaxial layers you want to grow on top of this substrate. I have just taken the example over here. GS is not the answer. I mean, it may be also the answer, but we are gonna take one substrate. So those substrate may be gallium arsenide, it may be indium phosphide also, or it may be gallium phosphide, or it may be aluminum phosphide. So we have to take that substrate, and on top of that we have to grow an epitaxial layer, right? And these are the options that have been given to the epitaxial layer. Now, okay, I will give one more hint. We have to choose the epitaxial layer such that it will give us this lambda of 650 nanometer, that is this band gap energy around 1.9. At the same time we will get a good lattice matching also. Now I have given all the hints. Now at least tell me which of the following points I should choose, point number A or point number B. I have marked it over here. You understood the question, right, or no?
Yeah.
Yeah, so any guesses?
Can we get
Sorry, I was not able to hear your full statement.
with immediate ion of X?
You're talking about INP?
No, option D, sir. Ion of 1 minus X.
Okay, so you're talking about point number B. Okay, so let's start with this point number B itself, right? So now, first of all, what should be the conditions? So the first thing is like there should be a good lattice matching, right? What do I mean by this lattice matching? So let's say if I take a substrate, right, and on top of that I am growing an epitaxial layer, right? So the lattice constant of this epitaxial layer that I will be growing, right? This and the lattice constant of this substrate, right? They should be closely matched with respect to each other, right? If they are very far, then what are we gonna get? So let me write, if no lattice matching, right, then what is gonna happen? We are gonna get defects. What will happen because of the defects? It will introduce some layers in between the EG. So you will get some layers between the band gap, and they will give you a recombination which will be non-radiative in the nature, right? You don't want this to happen. You don't want the defects to happen, because you are trying to fabricate a LED. You are not trying to develop just a normal PN junction diode, right? You don't want any defects to be present. So if you don't want any defects to be present, then the lattice constant of these two stuff should match with respect to each other. This is what Sir must have told you in the lecture also, right? So now the lattice constant should be very close with respect to each other if they are not aligning exactly, right? So now how are we gonna reach this point? Okay, so first I will start with the indium phosphide, right? So I will start with my indium phosphide, and then I am gonna add some what you can say, I'm gonna add some aluminum on it, right? So it will become something like what you can say, AlX and P1 minus X over here, right? So it will become no, sorry, not P1 minus X, sorry, I guess it's INX, Al1 minus X and P, right? So now if I move from over here, note the lattice constant over here. It's very near to 5.9, right? So now this is the lattice constant that I got. Let me write it, it's 5.85, right? Now if I try to go over here, I have to reach till the point I get 650 nanometers of wavelength, because this is what has been asked in the question, right? So I go and I reach this point number B. Now look at the lattice constant for the somebody must have joined. Okay, yeah. So now look at the lattice constant over here. Now Bhuvanesh, can you please tell me whether these two lattice constants are same or they are little bit far apart?
I think they are same because of the wavelength.
Sorry.
Because of the wavelength, they are same.
No, I'm talking. Lattice constant is on the x-axis. The indium phosphide lattice constant is this, and you reach the point number B, right? So at point number B, you got some compound, maybe AlX, In, 1 minus X, and P. So these two compounds are different now. So their lattice constants I am projecting on the x-axis. So the point number C and point number D are their lattice constants, right?
Yes, sir. So different.
Yeah, they are different, right? Yeah, correct. Now let's do one thing. Let's try to move on the different path now. Instead of going on this path, now we will move towards the point number A, right? So now what can happen right now? Okay, so if we go on this path, right? So the lattice constant is over here, it's around 5.9. The moment I reach this point over here, right? So now I have already another compound, that is gallium arsenide, available with me over here, right? And what is this point? So this point is some GAX IN 1 minus X P. So this is what my point number A represents. So point number A is satisfying two conditions. So the first of all, it's giving me 650 nanometers of wavelength of light, which I want, right? Because I want to fabricate a red LED. Now for this point, I want to see if there is any substrate available on top of which I can grow this epitaxial layer, right? So if that substrate is available near to this point means I'm talking about with respect to lattice constant, right? Because this is what I have written over here. If you don't match the lattice constants, then you are gonna get defects and you are gonna get non-radiative recombination, right? Which you don't want, correct? So now let me look at the substrates available over here. So the options were, first I could have started with the indium phosphide, but you can see its lattice constant is near 5.9, and if I look over here, this is around 5.65, correct? So these 2 points are very far apart with respect to each other. even if I grow what you can say a epitaxial layer of gallium indium phosphide on top of the indium phosphide substrate, because of the lattice mismatch there are gonna be defects and I don't be getting a good efficient LED, right? Now look at the gallium arsenide that is present over here. Now this gallium arsenide is already present, its lattice constant is near to 5.65. So if I take a substrate of gallium arsenide, so just look at the figure that I have drawn over here, right? So I had taken a gallium arsenide substrate, right? And on top of that I had grown this gallium indium phosphide epitaxial layer. Now it is satisfying both the conditions. The lattice constant of this gallium indium phosphide epitaxial layer, right? So this is my epitaxial layer, right? The lattice constant is 5.65. The lattice constant of the substrate itself is near to 5.65. So I got a good lattice matching that will ensure there will not be a good amount of effects that will be present. That means my LED will be efficient now because of the less number of effects, right? So that's the first point. And coming to the second point, it is giving me a 650 nanometer wavelength light, right? So that is the second condition. So now this point number A is satisfying our answer, right? So that means we are gonna use gallium arsenide as our substrate, and on top of that we are gonna grow a epitaxial layer of gallium indium phosphide, right? So answer number B is the correct answer because they are asking which compound will you suggest. So the compound means they are asking about epitaxial layer, not about the substrate, right? So now the answer number B is the correct. Guys, was this question clear? Because there was a lot of silence when I was trying to poke you to give some hints or something. Is this question clear? If it is not clear, then ask me. I will repeat this question again. No issues. Because this diagram is very important.
Sir, please repeat, sir.
Okay. Yeah. See, the basic understanding of solving any type of question where this diagram is given is to first of all find out the points. You first draw a horizontal line, whatever wavelength you want to get. You first draw a horizontal line and mark all the intersection points that are present over here, right? And now you just project those points on the x-axis. Now why we are doing that? Because by projecting those points on the x-axis, we are seeing कि we are trying to choose a substrate whose lattice constant will be very close to this projected point. And now why we want to do that? Because we want a very less amount of lattice mismatch to happen. Why lattice mismatch happens? Because if you have a different lattice constant for the substrate, right? You have a substrate over here and you have a epitaxial layer that you are trying to grow on top of the substrate, right? So if the lattice constants are not same, so sir must have told you this, right? So you have this substrate maybe, so it is connected something like this, right? And now on top of that, let's say I try to have this kind of a substrate. Just look at the lattice constant over here. This is so huge, right? This is A1, A2. A2 is much greater than A1, right? So now if I try to join these two things, right? This is, let's say this is my epitaxial layer and this is what? This is my substrate, correct? So if I try to join, then there will be a lot of defects that will be happening over here. And I don't want these defects to happen, because if I get those defects, then because of the defects, I will be getting extra energy levels in the band gap, right? And I don't want that. Why I don't want that? Because there will be a lot of recombination that will be happening if I introduce a defect levels in the band gap energy. See, the band gap energy is the what? Band gap energy is the place where no energy state exists, right? But because of the defects, there will be some energy states that will be existing in the band gap region, right? So if some energy states exist, then they will lead to more number of recombination, right? Now what is the nature of that recombination? That nature is non-radiative. That is, it will not give you photons. It will just dissipate as a heat in the lattice. And what has been asked in the question, they want me to fabricate a red LED. They want me to produce a efficient LED which will give me photons. They don't want me to dissipate the heat in the lattice, right? So I have to ensure that the what you can say, I have to ensure this non-radiative component of the recombination becomes lesser and lesser. To have this component lesser, we don't want any defects, and if we don't want any defects, then we want a good lattice matching, right? So I hope the lattice matching point was clear. Now coming to the point, so Bhuvanesh suggested me that I should start with the indium phosphide, right? So in both the cases we started with the indium phosphide. and the moment we reach to the point number B, I projected this point on the x-axis to see its x coordinate, and I found key it is something around 5.75, right? So now there is no substrate which is very close to 5.75. I have either indium phosphide or either I have a gallium arsenide over here. If you look from this path, this is what I am targeting, right? Aluminum indium phosphide. Now the point that I told you earlier, to fabricate the aluminum indium phosphide, you cannot use the gallium arsenide substrate. There is no gallium and there is no arsenide present in this aluminum indium phosphide. How can you grow aluminum indium phosphide on top of the gallium arsenide, right? It's not possible. So now only option left was the indium phosphide, but the indium phosphide's lattice constant is around 5.85. So I have two lattice points, 5.85, 5.75. So they were little bit far apart, right? So that's why I told him to let's move to the point number A. So from indium phosphide we move to the point number A. Now I projected the point number A's coordinate and I got the x coordinate over here. It was around 5.65. Now what are the subsets available to me? They are gallium arsenide and they are indium phosphide. Now just look at the gallium arsenide. Gallium arsenide is present over here. Okay. So if gallium arsenide is present over here, if I projected its x coordinate, it is exactly matching with the x coordinate of this point, right? So the lattice constant of gallium arsenide and the lattice constant of gallium indium phosphide, from where we got the gallium indium phosphide, we started moving from indium phosphide and we are reaching to gallium phosphide, right? So we are varying the mole fraction, that is the x, to get this compound. Now our lattice matching condition is satisfied, right? The lattice constant of gallium indium phosphide and the lattice constant of the gallium arsenide is exactly matching with respect to each other. So the one condition is already satisfied. Now coming to the second condition, it is also satisfying the wavelength condition. It is giving me 650 nanometer wavelength light, which I want to fabricate the red LED, right? Sorry, not I want, the LED should emit this wavelength of light, right? So it is satisfying both the conditions. So that's why I told him that point number A is more suitable as compared to point number B, because you will get more efficient LED out of it. Was this concept clear, Kyle, or are there any more doubts?
Okay, sir.
Okay, yeah? Okay, thank you. Now coming to the next point. Now the question is, now her advisor wants to know why she chose the given material. So support your answer with the proper justification, and we have already told, right? So the lattice matching is there and lattice matching with the GAS is happening. So option number 1 and option number 3 are seeming correct over here. Now let's look at the stuff. So the only difference between the option number 1 and option number 3 is of the direct band gap and indirect band gap. So now what we have to look at point number A, whether there is this black line is there, right? The black boundary line, whether it is a continuous or dashed one, because they have on the, just look at the left bottom side of the diagram, they have given direct band gap as a continuous solid black line and the indirect band gap as a dashed line, right? So now this point number A is lying on a continuous solid black line, right? So that means we still have a direct band gap material with us, and it is very good, right? Because our conduction band minima and the valence band maxima are just below each other, right? They are not displaced on the horizontal scale, right? So there will be a very good what you can say a photon emission that can happen out of this LED. So that means it is a direct band gap and we have a lattice match to GS. So option number 1 is the correct option, right? Now coming to this another question. Another graduate student wants to fabricate a yellow LED emitting at wavelength 575 nanometers. Now referring the data given in the figure 2, which compound will you suggest him or her to choose, right? So now let's follow the same procedure, okay? So let me draw 575 nanometer over here, right? And let me draw a horizontal line, correct? So I got what? So I have points over here. First is this point, second is this point, and there is this third point that is coming vertically. Actually, if you can see over here that this sorry, just a minute. Yeah, you can clearly see over here, like the dashed line is coming over here, right? Now again let's look what we can do. So starting from the indium phosphide, so to reach till this point, right? If I use the a aluminum indium phosphide as my epitaxial layer, then let me look at the substrates that are available to me, right? So first substrate that is available is the gallium arsenide, but I just told you I cannot fabricate aluminium indium phosphide on top of the gallium arsenide, right? And now if you look at the indium phosphide, then again there is this mismatch between the lattice constant, right? Now coming to this point over here, now if I go from the indium phosphide, right, just follow my cursor. I'm just drawing the red line. So if I go along this path, then I reach this point over here, right? Now if I reach this point over here, which is intersecting the 575 nanometer wavelength, then I will again project it on the x-axis, right? So I got some lattice constant which is near to 5.6, right? And it is what? It is my gallium indium phosphide. Now again if you see, there is some lattice constant mismatch that is happening. So I am denoting the lattice constant mismatch by the distance d over here, right? Now there is one good thing is that if you look at this vertical line over here, right? If you look at this vertical line, even this vertical line is coming over here. Now what is this vertical line? Now let's read the description that is written in this red circle that I have drawn. Aluminium, gallium 0.5, indium 0.5 and phosphide, and it is lattice matched to GS. So this line corresponds to that. So now why this line corresponds? Because we have started moving from aluminium phosphide, we came to this dot 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 line where the 2.36 EV was written, and from there we started dropping down actually, and from there we moved to just gallium indium phosphide, so that aluminium was there now, so it became 0 actually, right? So now so basically you can see for this line that aluminium is not present, and for if we are moving vertically like this, then this aluminium will be present till the point you reach this point over here that I am drawing over here, right? So now if you look at the point that is near in the yellow region, the circle that is I have drawn in the middle of the yellow region. So what is this point? It is corresponding to aluminium, gallium, indium phosphide. Everything is present over here. Now can I grow it on top of the gallium arsenide substrate? Obviously I can grow, right? So if I take a gallium arsenide substrate with me, right, and on top of that if I started growing the epitaxial layer of what? Aluminium, gallium, right, indium and phosphide. So I can obviously grow because this gallium is present over here. The gallium is present in the substrate also, gallium is present in the epitaxial layer also. So I can definitely grow it. And even my lattice matching conditions are satisfied, and even my 575 nanometer which I want to produce, even that is being satisfied, right? So this vertical line is satisfying everything. It's giving me good lattice matching, as well as it is giving me the wavelength of the light that I want to produce out of my LED, right? So now this aluminium, gallium, indium phosphide, this will satisfy my answer, and hence the option number D, not option number D, option number 5 that you are seeing over here, this is the correct answer. If you guys have any doubt, then please go ahead. I will move with the next question. Now coming to this point over here, so what they have shown over here, they are showing us the three structures, right? And they are showing us this is what you can say, this is the band diagram, because this is EC and this is EV, right? Now referring to the structure A, which of the following is the correct statement, right? So now they are asking us to compare the band gaps of what? Band gap of this with respect to this, right? So they are asking us to compare, first is the band gap and second is the refractive index. So they are asking us to do this. Now can you guys please help me in solving? See, this should be an easy question. You can directly see the band gap from the structure itself, right? So can you tell me in structure number A, right? So the structure number A is present over here. So in structure number A, which one has the higher band gap? Aluminium, gallium arsenide or gallium arsenide?
Aluminium gallium arsenide.
Correct, it is having a higher band gap, right? So good. So the band gap of aluminium gallium arsenide is larger, right? So this option is looking correct. So so this option is looking correct, right? So this option is correct. And now coming to the refractive index, does anyone have idea how the refractive index and band gap are related? Are they inversely proportional or directly proportional?
Inversely proportional.
Inversely proportional, right? So if the band gap of aluminum gallium arsenide is larger, then it definitely means that the refractive index of aluminum gallium arsenide must be smaller, right? So now this again, this second last option is looking correct, right? So this option and this option are the correct answer. So good. And now this is the same question. What they are asking: which structure will you prefer for fabricating the gallium arsenide laser, right? So now I will just ask you one question. The middle region, right, in both the structures that you are seeing over here, what is the job of this middle region actually? What you want to do over here? Like we just have a gallium arsenide structure over here, and why we need to create a heterostructure over here? What is the purpose of doing it? Is it doing something? It is just like a cavity, right? What is the role of this cavity? What it does, I mean?
Light improve the light emission.
Yeah, it improves the light emission, exactly, right? So now what it is actually doing, so let's say this is n type.
Multiplication.
Yeah, amplification also, correct. Yeah, yeah, correct. Now coming to the n type, and this is p type, right? Now the amplification, what you said, like I hope you are saying about the amplification of only a what you can say a narrow wavelength, not about the broader amplification, right? This is the main job of the laser, right, compared to the LED. Now this was the n type and this was the p type, right? Now the electrons from here move from here to here, and even the holes will move from here to here. So what we have done over here, if you just look at this red square, red rectangle, then just a minute, my stylus stopped working. Okay. Okay, let me try with the mouse itself. Okay. Just a minute. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at why the mouse is, let me see. Yeah. So if you look at this square, right, rectangle, so what we have done over here, we have trapped the electrons from the left side and we have trapped the holes from the right hand side. So now we are getting a lot of number of electrons and holes trapped in this region, and as you know, it will the recombination is directly proportional to the concentration of electrons and holes that you will be having in a particular region. So it will lead to a very good recombination over here, right? So that is the purpose of this cavity over here that you can see. Again, just a minute, something weird is happening. Okay, yeah. So now if you look at the structure number B, right? Again my stylus stopped working. What is happening here? Okay. Yeah. So if you look at the structure number B, right? So for the electrons, there is actually a barrier that is present, and for the holes also there is a barrier. My job of the cavity was to trap electrons and holes, but it is looking like this structure number B is pushing away the electrons and holes. Like it will not allow the electrons to go into this cavity that you can see in the structure B, right? So structure number A is the valid cavity, and as you can see, this is the main reason why we use it, right? As both of you had given me correct answers. So the structure number A confines both electrons and photons, being a double heterostructure. So it confines both electrons and photons. It should be I guess holes, I guess, because the holes move from here, the electrons move from here. It emits the photons. How can it confine the photon? Now yeah, so basically what you can say is like confining by means you can assume like obviously the light will be emitting only from this particular cavity. That's why we use the heterostructure, right? In the normal PN junction, your light would have emitted from everywhere. Now we are just using this, the efficient radiation is happening only from this cavity over here, right? So that is what the statement means. So the structure, the option number is correct answer. And let's look at the second last option, the structure A and B, as they confine both electrons and photons. So this is not the correct answer, because structure B is exactly opposite of what we are trying to create, right? So the only option number A is the correct option over here, right? Now, coming to this question, this is actually a very easy question. I will give you as a homework because we are lacking a lot of time. I will solve this question in the PPT itself, and I guess there will be no doubt because it's a very easy question, and I guess one of my other TA had also solved such questions. So I won't be solving this now. This will be the main question that I want to solve for today. So I will give you some hints for solving the question. So the question says at a wavelength of lambda is equal to 0.7 micrometer, right? The index of refraction for gallium arsenide is 3.8 and for gallium phosphide it's 3.2. Now considering the gallium arsenide and phosphide material with a mole fraction of 0.4, assuming the index of refraction is a linear function of the mole fraction, right? This is something new which we have encountered. Determine the reflection coefficient gamma. So now what is this gamma actually? So if you look, then this gamma is what? Gamma is what? N2 minus N1 upon N2 plus N1 the whole square, right? Where N1 is the 1 because it is given as a this substrate and this gallium arsenide phosphide air interface is given. So that's why this refractive index N1 is 1 over here. Now what they are asking us, so we need the value of the, what you can say, the refractive index of this, right? So anyhow we have to do something and we have to calculate the refractive index of the given material, given compound, right? So we have to find the refractive index of this. So this is the main question, and the only hint that has been given to us, assume that the index of refraction is a linear function of the mole fraction. So now what we can do, let's try to do this. They have given it as a linear function, right? So now let's say this index of refraction is a straight line with respect to the mole fraction, right? So this is my mole fraction and this is my refractive index, right? Now we need some conditions to solve for the value of m and for the value of c, right? So now let's substitute x equal to 0. Where we are going to substitute, see this compound is there, right? So x equal to 0 we will put, and we will put x equal to 1 over here. So after putting x equal to 0, what we got gallium arsenide. And after putting x equal to 1, what we got gallium phosphide, right? So now the refractive index of these materials have been given to me. The refractive index is what? 3.8, and the refractive index of gallium phosphide is what? 3.2. So what I will do, because they asked me reflection coefficient, I had to find out the refractive index of this complex compound. To find out the refractive index, they have given me, assume the refractive index as a linear function of the mole fraction. So I wrote this condition, right? Let's denote this as equation number A. Now what I told you, to find out the constants m and c, I need two conditions, right? So for solving those conditions, what I did, I substituted x equal to 0 and x equal to 1 in this compound, right? And I got gallium arsenide and gallium phosphide, and their refractive indices have been given to me. Now I will substitute the same thing over here. So at x equal to 0, right? So my refractive index is 3.8, right? So 3.8 is equal to 0 plus c, right? Hence we got the value of c as 3.8. Now at x equal to 1, I got a gallium phosphide and its refractive index is 3.2, right? So 3.2 is equal to m times 1 plus c, which is 3.8. So that's why you got m is equal to minus 0.6. So what your function became, so your refractive index, right, is like minus 0.6 times of x plus c. So this is what your refractive index is actually. Now we have to confirm this, right? This is the first time we are encountering such a problem. Now it's always better to have a sanity check, right? Now somebody told me in the previous question that the refractive index of material, right, is inversely proportional to its band gap, right? So now let me write the band gap for the GAS and GAP. So for GAS, right, so let me write it as EG itself, right? So EG of GAS is around what? It's around 1.42 eV, right? And gallium phosphide's band gap is around 2.24 eV, right? So the sanity check would be as I am increasing my mole fraction, see, just look at this arrow that I will be drawing. As I am increasing my mole fraction, I am moving from gallium arsenide towards the gallium phosphide, right? So what it tells me, as I am moving my mole fraction, my compound is becoming from gallium arsenide to gallium phosphide. So I will just write it, as my mole fraction increases, so my band gap should also increase, because gallium arsenide ka band gap is 1.42 eV and gallium phosphide's band gap is 2.24 eV, right? So as X increases, Eg should also increase, and this means my refractive index should decrease, right? So this is the sanity check that we want to perform. So let's look at this equation number 2, right? Put the sanity check on equation number 2. So as my X is increasing, this is a negative slope line, right? So as my X increases, my value of the refractive index will decrease. As my X increases, my value of refractive index will decrease, and which will increase the Eg, right? So it is satisfying the sanity check over here, right? So that means whatever we have got, it's looking like a correct thing as of now, right? So now what they are asking, we want to find the refractive index of this thing at what point? At mole fraction is equal to X equal to 0.4, right? So put X equal to 0.4 into, right? So what you will get, the refractive index will be minus 0.6 into 0.4 plus the value of C is 3.8, right? So the value of refractive index that you will be getting, so it will be around I guess 3.56. So this is the value of refractive index that we got, right? So now let's combine both these equations, equation number A and equation number B, right? So now they are asking us the reflection coefficient, right? So gamma is what? N2 minus 1 divided by N2 plus 1 the whole square, right? And what is the value of N2? We just calculated 3.56, right? So we are just substituting it over here, and we will just do the square of the whole thing. So the answer that you will be getting is around 0.315. So this is the reflection coefficient answer that you will be getting. I hope this question was clear to you. If you guys have any doubts, then please proceed ahead. I will be moving towards the final part of today's presentation. That will be the connecting everything together. So it will just take me few more minutes. After that, I will just close the session. I don't want to screw your Sunday. So now let's look at the what you can say, the radars first, right? So I will be taking the example of automotive radar. So what I am planning to do now, why I have brought the radars over here, because I want to connect everything, like how this semiconductor is fitting into this radar, and whatever we have studied in the initial part of the course, right? You have studied the Schrodinger, you have studied the Kronecker model, you have studied the potential wave, you have solved that equation, partial differential equation, right? So I just wanted to see whether that is actually helping you over here or not. So that's the only motivation for this slide, nothing else. So if I take the example of automotive radar, now where are they seated? So these radars are present in your cars. So now if you look, you know, right, when your car goes in the parking mode or it comes very close to another car, right, your car sounds a beep 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 sound, right? So it produces that sound, right? Now how it does, because it has the radars that are present around the cars, and that radars detects the, what you can say, the velocity as well as the distance. So as these radars detect ki other cars have come within the safe distance of your car, they will start producing the sounds over there. So radars won't produce, so the radars will give the signal processing unit will process that signal, and it will then it will give the signal to the buzzer, so that it will produce the sound, right? Now, so these radars are actually made at around 77 gigahertz of frequency. Now why this 77 gigahertz frequency came? Because of the application requirements, which I will be not going. If you are very curious about why this type of frequency was chosen, then I will just give you one hint. Just study about the imaging radars, okay? Imaging radars and range resolution. These are the 2 points that will help you. So from there, this frequency was chosen, and now from 77 gigahertz, now comes the next point. You remember I have told you the concept of unity gain frequency, right? Unity gain frequency. When the sir had taught you the MOSFET, I had introduced this concept, right? And I had given you the examples of two things. One was about the steradian semiconductor, right? Steradian semiconductor. And another example was from Qualcomm, I guess, the Qualcomm's 5G ICs, right? So now coming to over here, now using the same unity gain frequency concept, what they did to develop this 77 gigahertz radar, they had chosen the 28 nanometer technology node. And why this was chosen? Because you want higher FT. You want higher FT to be present, right? Now you want higher FT, because of that that can only happen as you reduce the channel length, right? And that's why they chose this 28 nanometer technology node, right? Now coming to this complete radar, I won't be showing you the entire architecture, but you just know, right? There are amplifiers, right? There are amplifiers, there are mixers, and there are antennas, other circuitries that are present in this radar, right? So they constitute the radar, right? Now how do I design the amplifier? The main designing parameter of my amplifier is what? GM of the MOSFET, right? So this GM is very important parameter for circuit designers like us. They help us to actually know what gain this amplifier can have. So what gain this MOSFET can give me actually, right? So now what is the GM? So it's what mu n Cox W by L times VGS minus VTH, right? Now from where does this VTH concept comes? Now this VTH concept comes from what you can say your band diagrams, and you must be remembering that equation, right? Root of phi f plus phi sb minus root of phi f, that body effect and all, right? I hope you must be remembering that term, right? So now where does this phi f come from? It comes from the band diagram, right? See, we derived this equation just by looking at the band diagrams and all, right? Now its value is what? Kt by q ln Na by Ni. I hope you haven't forgotten this, right? From where does my band diagram come, right? So you must be getting this now, right? It came from the band splitting, right? It came from band splitting, and the second term, it came from Kronig-Pegg model. It came from Kronig-Pegg model and the band splitting, right? Now from where does this Kronig-Pegg model came? It came when you had electron moving in a periodic potential well, correct? So we assume the structure like this, right? The electron is moving in a periodic potential well, right? And from where did this concept arise actually? So the solution of this thing gave you that Kronig-Pegg model, right? So the basis of assuming that electron is moving under the potential well, so its basis came from the Schrodinger's equation, right? And from where exactly, if you want, then it came from the particle in a box concept, correct? So you just remember this, you are getting the flow, right? So we first selected the frequency, then from there we selected the technology node according to our unity gain frequency concept. By the way, the selecting of the technology node I'm talking about, this is with respect to analog and RF side, right? If you talk about the processor, then this is not how we select the technology node. If you want to construct the microprocessors and other stuff, these are digital circuits, right? You want them to be consuming as less power as possible and as small as size as possible, right? So their selection requirement is little bit different, and the microprocessors are always designed at lowest possible technology nodes. So just remember this concept. I am talking this with respect to analog and RF circuits. If you talk about digital circuits, then you must be designing it at a lowest technology node that is currently available today. So if you talk about today, then it's around 3 nanometers or 5 nanometer, right? So now you studied the Schrodinger's equation. Then from there you moved on to that particle in a what you can say moving in a periodic potential well. From there you got the Kronig-Pegg model. From there you got the concept of the band diagram. From the concept of the band diagram you got the concept of phi f and all. From the concept of phi f you got the concept of threshold voltage. From the concept of threshold voltage, which is embedded inside the current equation of the MOSFET, you got the GM of the MOSFET. Now which is helping you to design the amplifiers and other circuits which are sitting inside your radars, which is designed at this 28 nanometer technology node, which is chosen at a particular frequency of 77 gigahertz, right? Guys, was this flow clear or any doubts in this flow?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It is clear, right? Yeah, so this was the last episode. Clear, right? Okay, good. So now this was the last part for today. I just wanted to tell you like how whatever we have studied, it's not a complete waste. If anybody argues with you that Schrodinger's equation and that quantum mechanics is completely useless, then just tell them this flow. This is how from the Schrodinger's equation we have literally moved to the what you can say how we are designing the circuits inside the radars and all, right? So if you guys have any more doubts in the questions that you have solved today, this was the last slide for today. I don't have any more questions. Let me just come to the last slide. Yeah. So this was my last lecture for this last problem solving session for this course, since this was the last week, right? So I just wanted to thank every one of you for attending all my sessions. Sometimes I may have went very fast because initially I may have took a large amount of time for solving the questions, but I hope like that problem had happened in the initial part of the lectures, that is lecture number 2 or lecture number 3. From there on I just reduced the number of questions and just try to align with you guys so that I can interact with you more and solve the questions very what you can say in a time efficient manner, not taking a lot of time and not giving a very less amount of time. So guys, any feedback, any suggestions, any improvements that you want to tell me, I can incorporate them in the next course only, not in this course because this is over now.
So we have parking sensor, right? So how it is related to that in car? Car parking sensor, right, sir? In car.
Yeah, car parking sensor.
Radar, sir. Car parking sensor we detect.
You want
the camera to detect.
Camera, no. See that camera that you are the camera that you are talking. It's a what you can say. It's a reverse parking, right? So I will just tell you the big picture. Okay. So by the way, this is not a power amplifier. I'm just drawing in. Yeah. So you know this is the screen that is present, which driver sees, right? So driver is sitting over here, right? And you will see what when you are trying to park the car, what is behind the car. Let's say these are other cars that are present, right? And so if you look, there will be one what you can say a color map like this. I mean there will be something. These lines will be always present in your what you can say in this on this screen. So, true, right? So this camera that you are talking about, this camera is helping the car to actually see what is behind. But what these radars are doing, the radar's job is to what you can say to so the radar's job is to feed this line that you are seeing over here, right? So it is sensing the objects around it. So let's say behind the car the radar is there. Now it will sense, okay, the car is there, even the car is here, even the car is here, even the car is here, and even using the camera, right? So even the camera plus radar, right, it will give you this complete big picture. And in this screen itself, this line that you are seeing over here, right, this diagram, this is coming from the radar because you have just a minute, yeah, because this is the what you can say a kind of image processing or kind of something that is coming because of the signals from your radar. And the moment you violate these lines or the moment you turn the car and you come very close to let's say this particular object, right, this particular object, then it will sound the buzzer, it will sound beep beep beep, right? So that's how the radar and camera works together. So what you can see is like the signal processing unit will be there. It will take the signals from camera also, it will take the signals from radar also. It will create this complete picture for you, which will be like a video from the back side of the car, and on top of that it will embed this type of ladder kind of a structure that you are seeing over here. And from there on you will be able to see, okay, I am moving very close to the other car, I should stop over here.
Right side, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Lakshmikanta, you have any doubts?
No, sir. Everything was fine. The sessions were quite. It was quite entertaining, sir, and it was quite informative, sir.
Thank you.
And